Bipartisan progress on climate change. Republican Carlos Curbelo teams up with Democrat Ted Deutsch to find consensus on climate change. The congressman is with us live.
This place has had a culture of corruption and a culture of obstruction for too long.
Blow up at Broward Health. The hospital district board goes behind closed doors with allegations of corruption. Board chair David DiPietro is live with us today.
He panicked like that. He can't get no oxygen. Nobody was telling me what was going on.
Gunfire at two South Florida schools. Bullets hit the buildings but missed students and teachers just barely. A disturbing trend, and we will take it up with the roundtable.
So much to talk about today. Good morning and welcome. Great, as always, to have you aboard.
We are back at full strength this morning, and we have a jam-packed hour for you, including this nasty dispute that is tearing up Broward's tax-funded hospital system, Broward Health.
First up, though, a bipartisan effort to address one of the most pressing issues at our end of the state peninsula, climate change.
It is an issue that has become highly contentious in recent years, with many Republicans saying they have not seen convincing evidence that human activity causes climate change or sea level rise. Most Democrats, on the other hand, say the evidence and the science behind it is overwhelming and that steps must be taken to curb it.
Congressman Carlos Curbelo is one Republican who agrees. This week, he joined with Democrat Ted Deutsch to form what they call the Climate Solutions Caucus. Congressman Curbelo is serving his first term, repping the 26th Congressional District, Southwest Miami-Dade, and the Keys. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day.
And thank you, and to you and your wife, and thanks for coming in. Let's begin with the Climate Solutions Caucus. It is so unusual that a Republican, a Democrat, and Ted Deutsch, who we invited, could not be here this morning, is a liberal Democrat, and you are a moderate conservative Republican. How did you come together to do this?
Michael, we live in South Florida. I represent the Florida Keys. We live at about sea level, and I have seen convincing, hard data that sea levels are rising. I want to live here for the rest of my life. I know my little girls want to live here, well, probably want to live here the rest of their lives, or at least have the option to. And if we don't do something, the trends are very troubling. So this is a sober effort to address an issue that is going to have, that is already having a direct impact on our livelihood here in South Florida, and only looks to get worse.
So doing something means what? What is the mission of the caucus, and what is the caucus planning to do that other efforts like this have not? I mean, this is legislative.
So what we've done is historic, because for the first time in the U.S. House of Representatives in at least 2 decades, this issue is now officially a bipartisan issue. Now, the question is, can we be relevant? And we have to be relevant, and that means crafting policies that both parties can get behind to address climate change. Some of this is going to have to do with the human impact on climate change, so mitigating human impact on climate change, meaning reducing carbon emissions. Yeah. There are other components of it that are more practical, like preparing for climate change. How do we build the infrastructure in South Florida, make the government investments that we're going to make this area livable? So we're now trying to build out the caucus, encourage Republicans and Democrats to join. You can only join if you have a partner from the other party that will join with you at the same time. That way we keep it truly bipartisan. And I'm very hopeful. There are now 14 Republicans in the House that have signed a resolution that recognizes climate change as a real issue and encourages the government to start working towards solutions.
Yeah, and what about House Speaker Paul Ryan? Have you approached him and said, Speaker, we've got this bipartisan caucus and support us, help us?
We want to grow our numbers before we go to leadership and start making specific requests. We need to show that we have a good, strong number of Republicans that will join Democrats like Ted Deutsch, who I'm so grateful to him for having the courage. It takes courage to be bipartisan in Washington, D.C. in these days, because sometimes leadership on both sides frowns upon it. So I thank him for being a wonderful representative for his community and for his willingness to do this together with me.
So, you know, it's so interesting that you talk about 14 Republicans have sort of signed on, and you've been very clear that this caucus is going to look at human activity as a cause of climate change. which is something that, you know, Senator Marco Rubio comes to mind. There are so many people who say the climate is changing, it's a matter of course, but absolutely do not buy into the science of human activity as the cause. What do you say to someone like Senator Rubio as you attempt to go forward?
Yeah. I called out my good friend Jeb Bush, who I'm supporting, and Marco Rubio, who I think would be a great candidate for president, because they have the national stage now. They have the attention of the national, international press, and they know that this is an important issue for South Florida. They live here, and I know that they want their families and their kids to be able to live here too. So I think it's a missed opportunity. I'm disappointed. The moderators, even though they understand that for a lot of Republicans this isn't an issue that they care to talk about, the moderators in these debates should bring up climate change, especially when there are two South Floridians on the stage who at the very least should explain their ideas or their thoughts on how we're going to address this in the future, or if they just think it's okay for the seas to keep rising and for us to do absolutely nothing about it.
Senator Rubio at the 2 debates ago said the impact on the paychecks of people who live week to week, paycheck to paycheck, would be too severe. It would hurt the economy to impose any kind of cap or trade or any of these climate change, environmental rules changes. And
yeah, well, let me be clear on that. I, too, have some concerns with the EPA. The EPA moves in a very aggressive way. A lot of times they don't take local economies into account. But it's up to us to craft an alternative to the EPA. Yeah. How do we develop a market-driven approach to addressing carbon emissions? That's what Ted Deutsch and I are working on as an alternative to the EPA.
So there is this lobby, this Citizens Climate Lobby, who has this carbon fee and dividend program, which almost addresses the cost to the local communities. And you probably know much more about that than I do, but it's essentially putting a fee on carbon emissions, but giving the dividend back to households to pay for it. Is that something that is part of the caucus plan?
There's growing momentum behind carbon pricing, which is essentially it's revenue neutral, so this is not, the government is not going to make a profit. The pricing or the cost gets redistributed to local communities, to low-income people who, without a doubt, anytime energy prices go up, it's low-income people who suffer the most, whether it's at the gas pump or when they get their electric bills, to help those people as we transition to cleaner energy, which should be the goal, and which is something that's happening here in Florida very slowly. I mean, FPL doesn't have any coal plants. They're heavy on natural gas, which is much cleaner than oil and coal. And they have nuclear, which is obviously carbon-free. So we're making progress. What we're trying to do is speed it up so that we can hopefully reverse this trend and at the same time prepare. We have to understand we humans are not going to turn a switch and all of a sudden be in control of the world's climate. So we also need to make preparations and investments in infrastructure that will allow us to keep living here. Miami Beach is already doing that.
Yeah, Congressman, let's move on to another big topic where you have been in the forefront, and that is benefits for Cuban migrants. You introduced a couple of weeks ago a very innovative act which would try to make a distinction between Cubans who come here for economic reasons and those who come here for political asylum. Explain what your bill would do.
This is a first step in reforming our broken Cuba immigration policy. Michael, Glenna, today there are people living in Cuba receiving public benefits that are funded by U.S. taxpayers.
Yeah, Social Security payments.
Immoral. It is wrong. There are seniors who are coming to the United States every day from Cuba and retiring here, and they're Social Security eligible for life. Some of them are making more, receiving more in monthly benefits than retirees who have worked in this country for 30 and 40 years. So what my bill seeks to do is to stop the abuse of these benefits, which are only supposed to be for refugees, for people who fear for their lives, fear for their safety, their security, and are leaving Cuba to come to the United States. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of those. The Castro government has not changed. They continue torturing, abusing, imprisoning unjustly. But there are a lot of people who come and declare openly that they're economic refugees. They're here for a better job, and they should be treated as economic immigrants. So under this law, if you're a Cuban and you arrive, you're going to have a choice. Either you claim asylum, and then you have to abide by all the asylum restrictions, and you'll get the benefits if your asylum claim is approved, or you're here as an economic immigrant and you'll get a work permit and won't be eligible for any benefits. I think this honors U.S. taxpayers, and it also allows us to continue helping those Cubans who are truly victims of persecution.
And some people have called you a traitor. You are Cuban American, proud of your Cuban ancestry, for sponsoring this. I will say that Senator Marco Rubio is the co-sponsor in the Senate, so you've got some powerful help here.
Yeah, and for those that have called me a traitor, I think that's just a horrible way to think of this country. I mean, the Cuban community, we have to all be so grateful. This country has been so generous with the Cuban American community, and if the mentality is that every group that comes to this country just has to figure out the maximum benefit that they can extract from this government, ignoring everyone else. You know, in this country, when you steal from the government, you're not stealing from a corrupt family like you're doing in Cuba. You're stealing from your neighbors. So this is a responsible reform. It's a modest reform. This is not going to turn the tide of Cubans coming to the United States, but at least it will restore some integrity to the policy.
Does it undo, essentially, the Cuban Adjustment Act?
No, it has nothing to do with the Cuban Adjustment Act, and legally, technically, it doesn't in any way address the Cuban Adjustment Act. I have said that if we want to change the Cuban Adjustment Act, that effort needs to be led by the administration, whether it's this administration or the next one. Why? Because if we make a serious effort to change the Cuban Adjustment Act, which I think should remain while there's a totalitarian dictatorship in Cuba, but if we're going to change it, at least the way it's applied, it has to be done by the White House. Why? Because we in Congress, we propose something, it takes weeks, months to debate. The anxiety levels in Cuba would rise. It could really provoke a mass exodus. So the administration would really have to take the first step in reforming the Cuban Adjustment.
Congressman Curbelo, great to have you come in. We will follow your bipartisan climate caucus and wish you luck with that.
Appreciate it. Thank you both very much.
Up next, Broward Health is in crisis mode. The hospital district board wants to keep an FBI corruption investigation secret. The board chair is here next.
Broward Health is reeling from the suicide last month of its CEO, and before that, a $69 million fine. And now the FBI is looking to allegations of purchasing kickbacks and bribery.
The board of the publicly funded hospital district this week took its discussions about it all behind closed doors, and that's a decision that the board chair actually opposed. That chair of the North Broward Hospital District Board joins us. David DiPietro was appointed by Governor Scott in 2011. He's an attorney in Fort Lauderdale. And welcome.
Mr. DiPietro, thank you so much for coming in. I mean, we want to emphasize that we understand Broward Health, but has $1.3 billion a year annual revenues, 8,000 employees. It is a critical health provider for North Broward. And it's just been shaken to the core by what's going on up there, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think starting from the Department of Justice investigation that we went through from 2011, and then we ultimately settled that case, and then with our CEO taking his life, and then now learning of a FBI investigation, internal corruption, the system's been shaken. But I think our team and our employees need to know that the board and the upper management is going to stand behind them and stand behind against corruption. I made a promise to the Department of Justice when we settled this case that I would hold everybody accountable and we would do the right thing. And that's why I'm here today, because that's what I want to have happen.
So what many people didn't know until this week, when it kind of exploded in this board meeting, is that there's a private investigator that was hired to essentially clean slate, root out corruption for all positive reasons. And in this meeting, all of this, that this private investigator found some issues, wanted to take it to the FBI, but this board wanted to take all of that information and the discussion of it behind closed doors. Why?
That's a good question. I think they're getting bad legal advice from our general counsel, unfortunately. There's been allegations raised by this investigator who Dr. El Sinati and I agreed to hire to look into some of these corruption allegations.
Wayne Black is his name, and he is a widely respected investigator, once worked for Janet Reno. Wayne Black is sort of the gold standard, as far as I'm concerned, of private investigators. Dr. Nabil El-Sanadi was the CEO. You worked with him. It is he who took his life a couple of weeks ago.
Right, and he has been frustrated with how the investigation has transpired. The FBI has asked us for hard drives and different information, and it's gone through this legal rigmarole through our high, powerful lawyers that are claiming, I think, what are bogus privilege.
Where are those hard drives? Where is that evidence right now?
I understand that after Mr. Black's email, that material has been provided to the FBI.
So it did go to them after all, even though the general counsel, Len Barrett is her name, advised or was holding up the dispersal of that information?
Under some theory of privilege, which I don't understand, because experienced investigators of the FBI know how to, they have taint teams. They know how to remove that privileged information.
Right.
But even still, as a lawyer and as a former prosecutor, I'm scratching my head to figure out what privilege we're even talking about.
Yeah.
So, you know, can I just say that a lot of people who are watching here, this is North Broward Hospital District, a lot of people who live in different counties, it sounds like a lot of process and intrigue. But the bottom line is, here is a critical multi-million-dollar facility that's funded publicly that a lot of people believe has a culture of corruption. Rightly or wrongly, hopefully we will find out, and the district did pay a fine along those lines. But I think the essential question here is, what did the board know, and when did they know it?
Well, I think the board didn't know the details of the investigation until Mr. Black emailed the entire board advising them. I don't think our general counsel kept us advised of these allegations. Now, I think they're getting bad advice that we would obstruct the investigation by going into a secret meeting. I think the secret meeting is illegal, but even if you can do it, doesn't mean it's good policy. It's bad policy when corruption is alleged to have a secret meeting.
All right. Well, you have a seven-member board, and on Wednesday of this week, and the Sun-Sentinel wrote a terrific editorial about this, the vote was 5-2 to take the meeting in the shade, that is behind closed doors. You argued strenuously, and one of the two votes against doing that was your vote. What was the argument on the other side to do this? That
we would obstruct the investigation that's pending. My position was, I wanted to know, how did we handle the investigation, not what's going to happen or what are the allegations of the investigation. What I wanted the board to know as a governing body of a $1.2 billion system is, what did our management and legal team do to assist or hinder the investigation? That's important for board members to know. Right. I think that the board was, all my board members are wonderful people. We all serve for free. I don't think that anyone did anything maliciously. I just think that they were receiving bad legal advice that we would hinder the investigation. But at the end of the day, we're accountable to the employees. And what are the employees thinking when they hear that a severance package has been paid to the suspect? What do they think? They need to look to the board to air it all out so that they trust us, because they're going to, in order for employees to deliver the care to our patients and to the community, they need to look to the upper management that we're doing the right thing.
Well, the severance package you're talking about, let's talk about that. I know you cannot mention the name of that purchasing director. You might be legally liable if you were, but here the guy who was under investigation for purchasing irregularities at the very least gets a nice kind of a parachute to leave the system. How much was he paid?
It's unbelievable. I just got the agreement on Wednesday because I asked for it. He got $17,000 in PL time that was paid out. He's on our payroll until June. I mean, that's really unbelievable.
So you could be rewarding bad behavior.
Well, he agreed not to disparage us, and we agreed not to disparage him. I mean, if we're a victim, as our management told us, of a crime, we should disparage him.
And what was the nature of his departure?
It was done through a contractual agreement and was never presented to the board or any of the board members.
Before or after the FBI investigation?
It was pending. And that's another thing, is that Wayne Black was allegedly fired during this FBI investigation. But then when I asked questions, limited questions I got to ask before we voted, it appears that he was never really fired.
Okay, can we go to break really quickly, pick this up right here when we come back?
Hold on, don't go anywhere.
2 minutes.
We'll be back with David DiPietro in just a minute. In hours studio live this morning is David DiPietro, who is the chairman of the North Broward Hospital District. They do business as Broward Health, and it is a huge operation. And David, they also, the system gets, what, $150 million a year from taxpayers in Broward County for charity care, indigent care. So there is, I mean, there is skin in the game from the taxpayers of Broward County as to how the system runs.
In addition, that's the 140 from property taxes. Medicare and Medicaid money is probably over in excess of 500 million. We're talking big dollars, and that's why I'm glad that Channel 10 is watching over the system and reporting these issues.
Well, we are, I mean, that is our job, and I also want to pay tribute to Rosemary O'Hara of the Sun Sentinel, who has written some great editorials and will be along later to join our roundtable. The suicide of Dr. Nabil El-Sanadi, who had been on this program, he was, I think, a kind of a charismatic figure. He did not leave a note saying why he took his own life, did he?
He didn't. He was a man I spoke to every day for 4.5 years. He did a lot of great for the community. He helped a lot of people, and I have a special place in my heart for Nabil. And I said it, he would be the last person in the world I ever thought would do that. He was my sounding board. I would call him, and he was my counselor, and somebody that I relied on as a as a friend and as somebody that was invested in this community. And it just really tragic and a lot of unanswered questions.
And who is going to succeed him?
Well, we're gonna do a public search. We're gonna do a national search. I've asked that we put a policy together where the board's not lobbied, that we have a search company give us qualified professionals regardless of political affiliation, and that the board isn't lobbied, and we, in the public, interview these folks, and we pick the best candidate from that process.
Can we get back to the FBI investigation just really briefly? The purchasing director, who is now under FBI investigation, who was allowed to have this severance pay taken, how, as a former prosecutor, how does this sit with you? Is this appropriate, or is this part of what people are calling the culture of corruption at Broward Health? I've
never seen such a thing. I mean, how does that look if a criminal case is actually filed that we paid $75,000, or he's actually still on our payroll until June, and we paid him $17,000 on the way out the door? I mean, how does, as a former prosecutor, it looks like we are, it could appear, and I'm not saying we are, but it looks like it could be we're asking for his cooperation in silence. And it can be perceived really inappropriately.
And so when you take that to your general counsel, who has hired outside attorneys that you are now paying several $100s an hour for to opine, what does she say?
$695 is the top rate, and these law firms have never gone through a vetting process by the board, and these are all no bid, and they're chosen at the pleasure of the general counsel. So they're saying what they're saying. I don't know. I have not gotten a definitive answer as to why it took so long for us to turn over information to the FBI. We're a public entity. We should open the doors in the filing cabinets when the FBI comes. Period. End of story. There's no reason to delay, even in the slightest, in my opinion.
All right. Well, I want to kind of sort of button this conversation up by saying on Wednesday the vote was 5-2 to have the meeting in the shade, but you never did have that meeting in the shade. You are now, what, waiting for some kind of a legal opinion about how you should meet, whether openly or behind closed doors?
So we're waiting for a legal opinion, which I already know the answer.
From whom?
That'll be interesting to find out. I think the board should pick the lawyer that decides who is going to give us that legal opinion, because I think there's a conflict of interest at this point.
And you unequivocally think that it should be in the open?
Even if we can legally do it, doesn't mean it's the right thing for the public. Just because we can have a secret meeting doesn't mean it's good public policy.
Have board members hired their own defense attorneys?
No, I don't. Not that I've heard of.
Should they?
I think the board should have their own counsel. I don't think it should be a defense attorney. I think it should be a general counsel that will advise the board on how to proceed on this.
Right. Well, we will be at your meetings, and for what it's worth, I mean, as practicing journalists, we hope that the meeting is in the public. We believe also that's where it should be. It is the public business. It is taxpayer money. It should be in the open, should not be behind closed doors.
And if they do a secret meeting, I won't attend.
And right, we appreciate your openness and your willingness to come here and sit here very much.
Thank you. Thank you for reporting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we are going to take this all to our Powerhouse Roundtable.
So much to talk about this week, from presidential politics to stories so many closer to home.
So let's get right to it with our Powerhouse Roundtable. Rosemary O'Hara, familiar face, editor of the editorial page at the Sun Sentinel, which this week took a very critical look at the Broward Health Board choosing to meet behind closed doors. Marlon Hill, Miami attorney, the firm of Hamilton, Miller, and Berthasell, a radio broadcaster, civic activist, and a round good guy. Mark Caputo is the Florida correspondent for Politico, the go-to website for political news. He writes the daily Politico Florida Playbook, which is a great way to start your day if you are a political junkie, and I could admit I am.
How early do you get up to do that?
It depends. Sometimes I just don't sleep.
Somehow I believe you.
If we can, I want to begin with something that is just a little personal, but I think it's so important to the entire community. That is, your wife is a teacher at Francis Tucker Elementary School in Coconut Grove, and there, as with another school this week, thugs fired bullets that went into a classroom. Thank God, no child, no teacher, no administrator was hurt, but tell us about your personal experience there.
The problem that schools like Francis Tucker are having is that violence is coming closer and closer from the neighborhood to the school. Last year there was gunfire that children playing on the playground could hear, and they ran terrified. There was also a home invasion murder, which took place at a house on the south property line that shares the south property line with the school. This time, there was some sort of situation where one guy went to shoot another guy. The guy jumped the fence of the school, and as he was running, 9 shots were fired. This time, at the school, one of the bullets almost hit one of the students who happened to be one of my wife's students who was getting special instruction in another classroom. These are community systemic problems, so I don't want to, obviously you blame the shooter for the shootings, but this is a clarion call to law enforcement that it is time to start patrolling these neighborhoods more heavily, certainly during school hours, because if you talk to the superintendent, he says there have been 60 school-age children who have been shot this year, none of them in school, 20 have been killed.
Yeah, but Marlon, now the shootings, as we saw this weekend at Carroll City High, the shootings are on school property. I mean, these are, we saw at Carroll City, they were mainly gangbangers who were shooting at each other, but there's no justification, and this is just despicable.
This is not a recent phenomenon. You know, Attorney General Loretta Lynch was just here this week. You know, we need to treat international terrorism the same way that we treat domestic terrorism with regards to our neighborhoods and how the resources that we dedicate. You know, so Superintendent Carvalho and Chief Moffett, I know that they're working diligently to make sure that we keep schools as sacred spaces. Mind you, we have places where we worship that are sacred. Our homes are sacred, but schools where our kids, one of the most vulnerable constituencies, we need to make sure that we're putting the resources there.
You know, bullets know no borders. And we sit here at this table, in this newsroom, in this community. There is not a day that goes by where we don't talk about violence in our community. Now that it's hitting home, because a school is a home, now that it's hitting home, are people just now waking up and saying, this is bad? No, this has been bad, I feel like, since we've been reporting.
Yes.
So do people remember this, and is this a mark in time that will be a watershed moment, or not?
Well, our institutions really, you know, the law enforcement, elected officials need to decide: are we going to make this a priority? Security for our kids is a place for everyone, but for our kids. Yes. And schools.
But the only conversation you really hear is about school resource officers. And we need a policeman with a gun in every school. Well, would that have stopped that, you know? Or what if they come in the back way or over by the gym? How many police officers with guns can you put within a school district? Mark, your point is that we need to be doing more enforcement around schools.
Correct. This is do not underestimate the deterrent effect that a visible law enforcement officer will have on criminals engaging in crime. Right. And I would presume, and it's a logical presumption, that if the guys shooting at Carroll City or at each other around Carroll City High School saw police officers, they wouldn't have done it. And I presume that the two fellows who got in whatever squabble it was that wound up you know, with 9 bullets being shot at a school, if they had seen a police officer there, they would have taken their beef elsewhere.
Yeah, also, don't underestimate. If you see something, say something. Kids,
that's
family,
not
people
happening.
In the neighborhood, that needs to happen more, Mark. We really need to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
Right, there is a distrust, and there is also a culture of not snitching. There's a distrust of the police. I'm not blaming the police. I'm not necessarily blaming the community. These are communities in crisis, communities in trauma.
Well, that culture has to change, I must tell you.
And that's what Loretta Lynch was talking about when she was here this week, one of the things. All right, if we can, I want to move on to Broward Health. Rosemary O'Hara, you have been, I think, really in the vanguard of pointing out how dysfunctional and how wrong-headed in many ways the Broward Health Board has been, trying to meet behind closed doors to talk about a publicly funded hospital system that is being under allegations of corruption.
Right. If I can step back just for a minute, Broward has 2 public hospital systems that operate pretty much under the radar, and they generate $3 billion a year in revenue.
Right.
When you have that much money, most of it going out in contracts, bad things happen. In the South, which does business as Memorial, there's a good, strong reputation because of a CEO.
Frank Sacco.
Frank Sacco, but he's retiring after 28 years, so there's a fear in the South that the South's going to turn into the North. In the North, decades really of allegations of corruption, and now we've got talk of an FBI investigation, grand jury subpoenas, and a private investigator who says that the district is dragging its heels in turning over evidence.
Right. No, it's a very disturbing situation. And you were at the meeting on Wednesday of the board when they voted to go in the shade, and you stood up at that meeting, didn't you?
Yes,
and
I
said,
did.
And what did you tell them?
Well, I told them that the Sunshine Law allows public boards to go behind closed doors if they're negotiating a settlement to a lawsuit, to actual litigation. But this was an email. There was an email that the private investigator sent to the board and the general counsel saying, you know, what do I do here? They're dragging your feet. And for some of the board members, it's the first time they've heard about grand jury subpoenas and FBI investigation. And instead of trying to talk about what's going on here and are we really impeding an investigation, they spent all their time talking about how to close the doors and, you know, keep the public from finding out what's going on there.
Even though they may be asking for this shade meeting, the public doesn't take advantage of going to these meetings anyway, Michael. These are public entities, one of the 10th largest public hospital district in the country.
And to your point, the public documents, if you did a public document search, you would find those emails and you would find that string and know all about the FBI investigation.
Well, it's not so easy. You know, we've put in public records requests and we're still waiting because the general counsel, who's embattled, and is part of the investigation, she is the person reviewing these public records requests. So there's a real holdup. And I'll tell you though, because it's leaking out, the room was packed. So before a packed room of people who really care, we just sat there with our jaws open, watching this board say, oh, we don't want to have this conversation in front of you.
Well, maybe a scandal will get people engaged now.
Yeah.
2 minutes, we'll be right back with the roundtable.
We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
While Donald Trump was building a reality TV show, my brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did.
How did he keep us safe when the World Trade Center came down? The World, excuse me, I lost hundreds of friends. The World Trade Center came down during the reign of George. He kept us safe. That's not safe.
The World Trade Center came down because Bill Clinton didn't kill Osama bin Laden when he had the chance to kill him.
Oh, it got hot and heavy last night in South Carolina.
Saturday night under the lights.
At the Republican debate. And Mark Caputo, I mean, Donald Trump being booed, I mean, loudly booed and repeatedly.
That was, I don't want to sound like a Trump partisan here, but that was a stocked audience.
Yeah.
Whether it was by conspiracy or coincidence, that was an anti-Trump audience from beginning to end.
All the debates have been. They're an audience filled with booers.
This one, it almost sounded like it was just a giant bar, the amount of boos he got. But remember, if you look at all of the polling, all the research, and the results, those people who are with Donald Trump, they are with him hell or high water.
All right, so he can even criticize George W. Bush as he did last night, and I guess, Rosemary, in the end, I mean, Trump is kind of Teflon coated, so the people who believe in him almost simply look past what any ordinary other politician could be, just a self-destructive tendency.
Well, you know, it's like he says it like it is, and frankly, when he was saying that the war in Iraq was a mistake, that kind of resonated with people, you know, and the others were trying. Marco was coming back, well, you know, W kept us safe. But, you know, but there was also that the country was in a deep recession, and things weren't so great at the end of the Bush administration, and that was a reminder of how the last Bush administration.
This is also a good example of the media genius of Donald Trump, whether it's intentional or just natural. He has inserted himself into all of the George W. Bush stories that are now going to take place in South Carolina on the campaign trail, because Jeb is going to have his brother George with him, and now all the reporters are going to be asking, well, hey, you know, the World Trade Center didn't fall on your watch. What about that? That's what Donald Trump points out. Hey, the weapons of mass destruction story that your administration pushed wasn't quite true. Donald Trump says that. What say you? So Donald Trump will be in all of those stories.
The booze don't make a difference, you know, because there's the anti-Trump lane on the highway to the presidency, the anti-Cruz, and then everyone else. So we'll see how it plays out, but please keep an eye on Ted Cruz, because he's a former Supreme Court law clerk with Rehnquist, former Solicitor General.
Whom everyone but Kasich called a liar last night.
Well, he knows how to play the game. He's also on the Judiciary Committee. Now that we have lost Justice Scalia, and he will be there among the 18 making his case as if he's arguing before the U.S. Supreme Court, which is the people of the United States.
And I just saw Scalia, I saw Ted Cruz on This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning, and he said again, as I guess they're all saying, all the presidential candidates, we are not going to confirm whomever President Obama nominates to the Supreme Court.
You know, his temper, in the seconds, in the minutes after the news broke that Scalia had died, Ted Cruz tweeted out saying, you know, we lost a good man, and we, you know, the next president should pick his replacement. I mean, he didn't even, before you get into the spoils, before you get into taking down the bed curtains, why don't you first give homage to the man and who he was? But so we saw his temperament, and yes, now we hear he's going to filibuster and
Mitch McConnell was eventually said, look, we're not going to do it. I do think in the short term, the politics of it, and I apologize because I'm among those who went right to the politics of it. I do think in the short term they benefit Democrats more, especially if President Obama nominates a minority, specifically Hispanic, African American, and the United States Senate. Yeah, there could be. But I'm just talking about I'm not talking about the raw X's and O's of blocking and tackling of running an election. If the GOP Senate is seen as blocking a qualified minority and minorities who have a say, and a major say in swing states like Florida, those minorities more than likely are going to come out and be motivated by that, presuming the Democrats do it right, and that can make a difference potentially in an election in a state like Florida, and Florida can make a difference in a presidential race across the nation.
You know, many viewers don't get into this world of picking judges, whether it's locally, by the state, or federally. This is a very important moment, seminal moment for the American people to pay attention. The highest office is not the president. It's a citizen of the United States. And picking a nomination, the Constitution says, Article 2, the president has the power, presidential power, to, on the advice and the consent of the Senate, takes a majority, but the person has to go through the nomination process. So it has to happen. At least the most time that it's taken is over 125 days.
Especially now with a split court. What happens now to, I mean, what are the big death penalties?
Climate change is a big thing.
Climate change, affirmative action. What happens?
Abortion rights.
What happens is it defaults to whatever the lower court ruling was prior to it getting to the Supreme Court. So President Obama's climate change policies actually might be able to make it through. That is, if it becomes a 4-4 tie at the Supreme Court. So,
which it was here.
Right. Well, what do you mean by it was here?
Scalia, when they suspended his climate change action plan, it was 5-4.
Correct.
Without Scalia, it's 4-4.
Right. And now it's not going to be ruled on in the short term until they do it. But to Marlon's point, we're now actually going to have a presidential race where the Supreme Court might just be a front and center issue. And
and that's a good thing.
More than likely will.
And most of those court of appeals, district court of appeals, lean to the left, actually. So apportionment, abortion rights, unionization, all those other key issues. And you remember also as well, what about the cases that Scalia was deciding on? Those cases, they may have to also re-argue them because they don't want to deal with if in fact they have a split.
Do you know some of those offhand?
All those big issues, apportionment, regards to district hen, abortion rights, Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, executive orders, immigration, huge issues in this session.
All right, before we run out of time, I do want to bring up the bill, which I think kind of courageously that Representative Curbelo has proposed, that is going to would take away some of the benefits from Cuban migrants that they have enjoyed. I mean, they get Medicaid, they get food stamps, they get work permits, they are admitted in a way that no other country is allowed to do. I mean, I think that it shows some gutsiness on his part to propose this.
Afraid of the word.
Yeah. You know, we at the Sun Sentinel editorial board were critical of him for taking a good while to make it happen. But in the end, he did come out with legislation. He has gotten sponsors. So there's a chance something might happen because Cuban immigrants are really immigrants more than anything. They're coming here because things are bad back there. It's not about that they're politically persecuted, yet they get here and they get all of this largesse that's not given anyone else, and it's not fair.
And your paper has done a fabulous job on reporting on it. All right, we are out of time. Thank you all for coming in. Happy Valentine's Day. And may you all enjoy it, you and Tom.
And up next, what does Snow White, Iowa, and New Hampshire have that Florida may not? Well, besides the snow at election time, notes from the road coming up next.
Good afternoon, South Florida. It's nice out there. Temperatures already hitting those low 70s all across the board from Pompano Beach all the way down to Key West. We do have a breezy east-northeast wind, 15 to 20 miles per hour, bringing in these cumulus-looking clouds. But these are fair weather clouds, so no rain associated with this. By tomorrow, it'll be warm and cloudy as well. We'll have a better chance for showers on Tuesday. Highs tomorrow, 78 degrees, and then Tuesday hitting a high of 81 with a few showers around. Glenna.
Jennifer, thanks. This week, the campaign trail veered south and west to North Carolina and Nevada, bigger, more diverse states with higher stakes for some of the candidates. But as we saw in the last few weeks, relatively small, snowy white Iowa and New Hampshire have something that bigger, badder states do not, generally speaking, of course, a serious engagement with democracy. Come election time there, people on the streets, in restaurants, in each other's living rooms, they're debating and discussing issues and candidates, even right up to casting their votes. They are into the issues, from healthcare to financials to national security. They have really pointed questions to ask the candidates. Because of their position at the start of the election season, they get the candidates' attention and they run with it. They show up to events, they make sure they get FaceTime, and they're evaluating responses in real time. These voters want authenticity, not staged and scripted candidates, and they form opinions with research and a refreshing kind of open-mindedness. We met people who had narrowed their choices to 2 or 3 candidates from different parties. The best part of our time in the frozen north, a noticeable absence of the malice and the venom we see so much between parties, and both parties faithful. Understanding and compromise rather than anger and distrust. Why is that so important? Because a democracy really works best for everyone with a careful balance of conservative and progressive policies. So what if we had a caucus in Florida? What a circus that would be. Maybe in a good way. What do you think? We invite you to weigh in on any topic you like. Right?
Well, we do, and we will respond to you on email, Facebook, Twitter, any of these addresses. We are easy to find, like to talk to you. And remember, stay informed, get involved, and have a lovely Valentine's Day.
Oh,
and you too.
Thank you. Same to you. It's a beautiful Sunday. Bye.